Hi everybody, I just wanted to demonstrate how I have created a collection of API processes to generate courses within an account in Canvas. So, what you have to do in order to use the API, there are a couple of things that you need to understand, and you're going to have to go to the API documentation, which is at api.instructure.com, and you will find it to be fairly large and a little bit crazy looking. And if you've never used APIs before, it may be a little overwhelming. I'm going to pull this into view here. And you can see here are all of the API calls that you can make, like all the different processes that you can engage. So that's one of the things that you need to know. The other thing that you need to know is that when you are working with the API, you can only do things that you have permission to do within the scope of your role in Canvas. So if you're a sub-account admin, you can do all of the same things that you would have done in your sub-account if you within the user interface. There are some things that the user interface prevents you from doing, and there are some things that you might want to do repeatedly and not have to go through and click all of the buttons. So that's what the API is good for, is some things that the UI limits you in doing and some things that the UI limits you from doing rapidly and repeatedly. So that's why you might want to use it. First thing you're going to have to do to use the API is you will have to generate an access token. It's one of the main things you have to do. So, and you do that by going into your account. You're logged into Canvas, you click on account, and you go to settings. And in settings, you can generate an access token. It's right down here. I have a number of these generated. You just hit the button for a new access token, and you want to give it a name just so you can find it again later, and give it an expiration date. Don't give it a never. I have a number of those that get generated by things like apps and stuff. You can come back in and delete these or regenerate them or whatever. It's not a bad idea to clean out those tokens every now and then, but anyway, you generate a token. Grab that token, and then you will paste it into Postman in the authorization tab. So that's, I'm just kind of giving a quick rundown of how this works, I guess. So when you're creating API calls, there are four parts to it, four main parts. One is the process or the method, like what are you doing? So in the first case here, we're going to get some information out of the system, and then we're going to post some new stuff into the system. So there's, within Canvas, we support get, post, put, which is updating something that's already there, and delete. So those are the four different kinds of methods you can employ. And then we also have the location, the URL of this call. And then there are parameters. And then there is your authorization. So in the authorization tab, that's where you would enter your token. And it is a bearer token. Don't worry about that. That's my token. Don't try to copy that down. It's not going to get you anywhere because it's going to expire before I post this video anyway. All right. And plus, it's just going to be in my beta instance anyhow. It's not going to do you any good. Okay. So what I am doing here, I have three different procedures. I'm getting user data based on a variable. And this variable, we create variables in curly brackets. And so this parameter is a search term, and it's just a string of text. And it can be any text that's associated with a user in your account. In this case, right up here, you can see that I am calling this, making this call to my account 111. Why 111? Well, that happens to be my root account in my instance of Canvas. Yours is probably 1. Mine is 111, and I can find that out by just going to my admin tab and clicking on that admin account, and I can see 111, and I happen to know that this is my root account. Okay, so your root account is probably 1. If you're working in a sub-account or you're a sub-account admin, you'll want to get the sub-account ID and put that in the URL right there. And I got all of this stuff, by the way, from all this sort of primary stuff that's in this URL from the API documentation. So the root domain here, the tgibbons.beta.instructure.com, that comes from my domain, right? That's my Canvas instance. And then the API v1 accounts, this will just be something that you have to fill in. And then this users part, this is all kind of in the call that I'm using, which is a get for user information, get an individual user. So what I happen to have is a bunch of people's email addresses, and this only works if you have the ability to see these people in your instance of Canvas. And that means in your sub account in Canvas, they have to have an existing presence, which usually means they have to have been enrolled in a course in your sub account somewhere in order for this to work. Otherwise, their account is just going to exist at the root level. And if you aren't a root admin, you won't be able to do this, right? It'll just turn back a 0 reply, right? There won't be anything there. So I'm just working in the root account. So a way around this is if you, the particular application that I'm thinking of is enrolling a bunch of faculty members into a professional development course in a sub account. Right. So you can enroll all of them just using their email addresses right in the UI. That's relatively easy to do. But then going in and making all of their sandboxes, like if you need them to have specific sandbox accounts for the training that you're engaging in, that's harder because you're having to go in and create the account, add the person, do rinse, repeat, right? It's kind of a long process. So what I would recommend doing in this particular instance, because this is kind of the problem that I was trying to solve, I would grab everybody's email address, paste it into the main course, that main training course, and enroll everybody in that. Then they're going to have presence in the sub account that you have administrative rights over, because presumably that PD course is going to be in that sub account where you are a sub account admin, right? So you're just wanting to pull that sort of a user account into a kind of presence within your sub account. That's going to be important. So a lot of what you can do, like I said, is based on permissions. All right. So here's how this works. Really simple call. I'm just calling for the user ID, the user information, and what you get returned back is a object that looks like this, right? So this is actually an object inside an array, and it's an array of one, like one object. So kind of getting to how to create the variable here was actually fairly difficult. So for me to understand, because I was using JSON Pathfinder tools, and it was not returning something that made sense to me. So this variable, you'll see it's red here in Postman. So I'm using Postman, by the way. I didn't mention that. But in Postman, you can see this variable is red and in curly braces, right? So the double curly braces makes it into an actual variable. And the user underscore email, that is actually the header within the CSV file, where I just have one column in the CSV that is headed with user underscore email, no braces or anything like that, just user underscore email, and then everybody's email address is listed in that single column. And then it's just saved CSV file. That's it. One column. Because that's my starting point. And so this red variable is going to pull from that data file when we get to the point where we run all this stuff in order. Okay, so that's how this is built. And then at the end of this job, when this job runs through, it's going to run a test script. Okay, so here's this test script, which I kind of cobbled together from some videos and some other stuff. So basically what I've done here is I've set a test script to make sure that I get a 200 reply, which is an OK. That means that call returns some data. When it returns that data, then what I'm going to do is parse the body and create some environment IDs here, or some environment variables. So what I'm doing is basically parsing the body and going, all right, I'm calling the body user search. And when user search in position 0, that's the first array. This is the first object in the array, the 0 object, right? That's always number 1. I don't know why. Return the ID. So it's user search because I called it user search here so the parsing of the body makes it called user search. So user search is this array, or this object parsed. And so user search square bracket 0 and square bracket dot ID, right? Because this is ID here. Right. Same thing here, 0 dot name. What I'm doing is grabbing the name here, this text string, to create a course name stem so that I can create a friendly name for the course, right? When I generate it, that's based on the person's name because it's their individual sandbox. And then I'm logging this stuff, and I'm also creating the variable. So I'm doing the log so that I could see if there were any problems on the test. And then PM, that's postman.environment.set, user ID, course name stem, course name stem. So it's just saying like, okay, this is the global variable, or this is the environmental variable. Use this thing from here to kind of fill this in. So that's another thing that I had to do. I actually had to create an environment, which you can do by just coming up here and clicking new environment, giving it a name. You can put in the variables here, whatever you want to call them. You can call them whatever you want. So let me actually show you what this, All right, let me show you what this looks like. I've got a user ID, a course ID, and a course name stem, right? And this is from the last time this ran. This was the user ID that came out in this. This is the course ID when I created the course, because I have to do a little bit of that too. And then Tom teacher. Okay, that's the course name stem, and in this case, that's that, right? So it's just, the script is setting these variables within this environment only. It's not a global variable, it's just an environment-dependent variable, right? So that's what this script is doing, right? And that is that first call. So basically what I'm doing is I'm using this data that's returned to generate two specific variables, the name of the person and their user ID in Canvas. This is the ID that you get when you open up their user ID page in the URL. It's a unique identifier in the Canvas database. Let me actually show you really quickly where you can find that if you don't know. I know this video is going to be long because I can't shut up. Let's see here, admin Tom. Let me pull this guy in. All right, so right here at the end where it says users 497, that's his user ID in Canvas, his unique ID in the Canvas sort of backend. That's that number right there for this user, right? So 502 for Tom teacher, Tom admin is 497. I have relatively low user numbers in my instance because I don't have a lot of them. All right, so those are the two pieces of information I'm grabbing from this call. Next call is post to create a new course. So what I'm going to do is, again, I've got that same string here for my instance, and then API v1 accounts, account ID, courses, course name. So in this case, the account ID comes up as a path variable, and I put that in right here. And in this case, it's going to be 111. Again, that's my root account, and that's where I'm going to create this course, because that's, and in this case, I'm going to create it in my root account. If you're doing sub accounts, put your sub account ID in there. You just got to make sure, again, that your users have sub account. The reason they have to have presence in the sub account is not to create this course, but so that you can actually enroll them when we get to that point, because they have to be present there. All right, so account ID, courses, course name, and what I've done is I put course name stem in here, and see, notice my variable is orange. That's because it's being generated. It's dependent on a different call. The red is like, that's an unresolved variable. This will be a resolved variable. And I know it's kind of hard to see in dark mode here, actually, come to think of it. So, and then I put in a stem here that's 4.18.sandbox. So what it's going to be when this generates, based on this, actually, let me show you up here. Based on this, it would be Tom teacher, because that's my course name stem, right? Tom teacher space 4.18.sandbox. That's what it would be. This parameter here, offer, set to true, means that I'm generating the course and publishing it at the same time, right? That's all this is doing. So it's creating a course named this that is published in this account or sub account or whatever. It's all it's doing, and it will return all of this information. One other thing that I need to do here is grab this course ID. So I need to define this variable. I need to define the variable for this particular run, right? So again, in my test area, this is a script that runs after the job runs. So again, I've got making sure that this is a 200 return, and I am going to again parse this. In this case, I'm calling the parse data course post, and it's going to be course post.id. There's no 0 here because check it out. This is not, the return here is not an array. It's just a single object. Curly braces, no square brackets and curly braces, just the curly braces, which tells us it's just one object. That I learned that while I was building this out. And then again, I define the variable at the environment level right here with this line of the script. And that's it. So I'm checking for positive response, parsing the data, identifying the data that I want to be the variable here, and then setting that variable based on this information that I've identified from this run of this call. Final piece, enrolling this user into this course. Okay, so I've got user ID. Remember, I defined that back over here, user ID, right? Plugging it in here. Again, I can see that it's orange, so it's curly braces, right? And it's orange, and that means it's defined. Course ID, right? That is pulled from, again, the environmental variables that I've defined right here in this second job, right? So user ID, I am creating a teacher enrollment, and that value, so the enrollment type is teacher enrollment. It could be student enrollment, teacher enrollment, TA enrollment, designer enrollment, whatever course level roles you have, you could put that in there. The standard ones actually get put in like this. There's a variable for custom course level roles that you would, a different parameter that you would use here, and you would check the API documentation about this, right? And so one of the path variables that we have to have is the course ID. This autofills when I put this stuff in that I grab from the documentation, right? So enrollment course state is being set, the enrollment state is being set to active, by the way. So I'm sending this out to, I'm putting this into the system. Normally when we add somebody to an enrollment, it invites them, like if we're doing it manually in the UI. In this case, I have 3 possible values: active, invited, or inactive. I'm just going to activate their enrollment, and they don't have to accept the invitation. That's the behavior we expect from the SIS integration, right? So that's what I'm doing here. Course ID, again, a pulled variable, right? And then I have something that's turned off here. I'm going to turn it on so you can see it a little bit better. Enrollment notify, that key, and again, these are all listed in the API documentation. That key, if I set that to true, it's going to send this user a notification that they've been enrolled in this course. I don't want to do that right now because I just don't think it's because this is beta and it's testing, and I don't need to let some of these are actually legitimate email addresses for friends of mine in my test instance, in my sort of demo instance of Canvas, and I don't really want to send out this information. I don't want to say, hey, you got enrolled in a course, or 5 courses, as I've been running the tests on this. So that's why I have this turned off. Plus, it's going to be in beta, so it's only around for a week anyway. All right, so that's it. Right? And so what I need to do basically as a starting point is, back in my parameters area, I kick off by feeding this process a specific piece of data, a user email address. Could be any search string, their name, anything that shows up in this user information. I use an email address because generally it's unique, right? Sometimes it isn't, and so you might get into some problems there, but generally it's unique. So then what we do is we create the course, and then we enroll the person in the course, and that's it. So it's this process, this process, this process. And so what we're going to do, I created this in a collection in order to run it as a process. We are going to run it, and I can go into Runner by clicking this and selecting Run, or coming up here and clicking the Runner button. Either one of those is fine. So I'm going to hit Run here, and it's going to open Collection Runner. It's Postman Runner. And what I'm going to do is I want all 3 of these things. If I wanted to leave one of them out, I could uncheck it, but I do want all 3 of them. Over here, I'm in the environment Sandbox creation, Right now it's saying iterations 1 and delay 0 milliseconds. I'm going to select a file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my demo emails CSV. That is where I just have that single column of email addresses. I didn't show that because it's got real people's email addresses in it and you don't need to see that. So I'm going to go ahead and open this. And when I do that, it actually reads and it tells me, hey, I've got 13 columns. I've got 13 rows in there, 13 email addresses. It's going to run 13 times. So it'll go 13 times. I could just run this once as a test, but it's my beta, so it doesn't really matter. If I did run it once as a test, then I'd want to go into that CSV file and take out row 1 if I got a positive return, if it all worked. Right? But I would recommend always testing this kind of stuff in beta. I'm going to give a 10 millisecond delay here. The only reason I'm doing that is just because you can just do 0, but you do bump up against a quota if you were to run this like a lot. 13 iterations is not going to create a problem, but if you were doing like 500 iterations, you might get choked for traffic, maybe. Okay, so I can also choose to save my responses so I can go in and look at them and see like how did this work. So I'm going to save those responses just so we can see all the data in there. And I'm going to hit run, and this is going to run 13 times, and we're going to see the returns as it happens. So this is cool. I'm seeing 200 okay all the way down. It's kind of running through rapidly, and I'm seeing which iterations are here, right, are working, and there's 13, and we're done. All right, so that goes pretty quickly, and I can open this up and I can actually look at the request body and see, oh, the request body's unavailable. I can see the headers, like I saved this stuff, right? I logged the stuff. I feel like the request body should be there, but it's not. But I can see like, hey, what happened? Oh, there's the response body. There we go. What was up here that wasn't showing me? Request URL. No. Request body. Oh, okay, I see. The response body is really what we're looking for, what I was looking for. So this is that sort of glob of data that came out that defined my stuff. Okay, so cool. Everything looks jazzy and great, right? But what I need to know real quick is, let's see, what did I call those courses? Let's look at the response body and see. Tom Teacher 4.18 Sandbox. Okay, so I'm looking for the 4.18.sandbox courses. And I'm going to, I can see a partial view by just going into statistics at the root account here, because again, I placed it in the root account. If I were in the sub account, that's where it would be. And I could kind of see what's posted recently. 4.18.sandboxes. There's Stephen, course right there. Here's my student, all my, FACO users in there. And I can also go into courses here and go all the way to the end, page 9, and I will see all of the most recent creations. It kind of does it backwards, right? If I go to page 8, I might see some of those as well at the bottom. Yeah, this is the one that I made just kind of as a test before I started the video. But here are all the courses that all 13 courses I just made. So there you have it. And I can just go in here and I can see this is Tom Student. Tom Student is the correctly enrolled person. Kathleen, there she is, right? There's Janet, there's, so this is kind of cool. Not ePortfolio moderation. Oof, I don't need to be in there. So this is in my beta. I think this could be super useful if you have this kind of task where you're having to make a bunch of sandboxes all at once. I find this to be, it was a fun little problem to work on. So hopefully this is helpful. I'm going to stop this video. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll put like the script information. I'll put like a text file in the comments down below in this YouTube video. So hopefully this is helpful.